I go by Anarchy Seeds on YouTube, and I basically search anarcho-capitalism and libertarian from time to
Yeah,
time and see who's uploading. And I saw your
absolutely.
channel because you had a few titles with that in their vein,
Mhm.
and I just started watching and actually thought you had a really cool channel. Basically, dropping a video every day. I think you said you pre-record some of them and then schedule the uploads.
Yeah, I try to pre-record pretty much all of them, and then I schedule them for 3:30 every day. Just have them premiere, and then
That's a
yeah,
that's just trying to be in the YouTube grind for talk about YouTube for a bit. That's how you got to do it, just to build an audience. Like even for myself, I was just kind of into it just because I could be like, oh, if I subscribe, I'm gonna get your next video tomorrow or whatever, and you've been producing, so I thought I'd compliment your channel. It's a
yeah.
pretty
Thank
sweet.
you, man. Thank you, man. It's a grind. It's very difficult with like all the school shit, and I have a roommate too, so I try to record
Yeah,
as much as possible when he's not here. But
yeah, I
sometimes
hear
he'll
you.
come in at the end, and there'll be a cameo or something.
That's super funny. I could imagine doing that all in college, and yeah, like I'm way less busy now that I'm not in college. Frankly, I
Yeah,
feel like that's
for
where
sure.
you're at your just have a class schedule and homework, and then you can just fill your time with so much other stuff on campus. Everything.
For
So
sure.
yeah, for me, I was talking about YouTube here. So yeah, you also said when in like your first couple of videos, hey, like this is the plan, so you kind of knew what you were getting into. Whereas a lot of YouTubers, they kind of just make their first video, pointing their camera at themselves, talking, and then they don't have too much of a plan to go from there. I don't know how much you have planned out like the topics for all of your videos, but at least the strategy of like here's what the YouTube channel is going to be probably gives you a lot of whatever control or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I originally made it just to like talk about Ayn Rand and some of her ideas, but I think it's kind of it's kind of developed in just talking about whatever I find, because a lot of my stuff that I record isn't something Ayn Rand ever talked about or anything like that. Like she never had any experience with a lot of this stuff, so
Yeah, I went. I'm kind of a Rothbardian, so whatever. We have our favorite authors and all that stuff, but there is something to be said on in both regards for bringing their ideas into a modern age. So I feel like that's
yeah.
part of what I do on
Mhm.
YouTube is you just do the stuff that they didn't have access to. Their ideas still stand. That's kind of the beauty of it all. And now there's a new medium to kind of express them in. And like I said, with your YouTube channel, you had a very good uh, setup, and it gives you some structure is what I was looking for. Just having that
Yeah,
structure lets you be like, oh, I do have this new idea, but at least well, I'm going to encapsulate it in a 10-minute video and release it, 3:30. That kind of
yeah,
stuff is less to worry about. And like you said, you're pretty ghetto with your recording. I was too in college. That's when I started this channel, and actually, even produced more just because I was just using the Windows Movie Maker or whatever, slicing stuff
yeah,
together, and it was easy just to churn out. Now I feel like, oh, I got to make a product and have all the Adobe stuff, and I want to use it, but it just slows me down sometimes.
yeah. I feel that. I
So
just
you
load up
mentioned,
the camera and
I
just let it go.
honestly, dude, I'm getting the idea that that's just the way to play.
Yeah.
So you mentioned Ayn Rand. Did you start reading her in high school, or when did you pick up your first book of hers, and what was it?
I started reading Ayn Rand in, I think it was my junior year of high school. I just heard about her online, and then like I watched the Dave Rubin video with Rucka Ali, and he kind of like explained it in a very interesting way to me, and like a way that made a lot of sense with my life. And I just picked up the Fountainhead after that because that was the recommendation. I read the Fountainhead, and then I just branched off into all the other stuff that
Nice.
she's wrote.
And her
Yes,
nonfiction too, I assume.
yeah, a little bit. I haven't had much time to read as of late, so
Yeah.
it's a grind
I'm not
reading it.
just trying to get some common ground. Like I haven't finished even Atlas Shrugged. Have you read her Romantic Manifesto though?
I want to. I have it. I have
It's
like
a
all of her books, but right up
yeah.
on my
That's
shelf.
actually
But
that's the only book of hers I finished, but it's a great book. I was really impressed, and I got into that because of a podcast I listened to called The Midside. Have you heard of that?
I have not.
They're objectivists, and so that whatever they have the libertarian bend enough for me to whatever I
Yeah,
pick them up. They're on like the liberty radio network or whatever. So they published them, and no, now I'm a huge Midside fan, and they're all basically Randian. So, but their twist on the whole thing, their podcast is devoted to movies and TV, and they kind of for romanticism in art versus naturalism. So, are you up on that distinction?
Yeah, I'm not super educated on the aesthetics, but I understand that essentially just romanticism versus naturalism. Just the idea of like portraying like a philosophy through characters and like ideals and characters and stuff rather than like as people as they actually are, kind of.
Exactly. So they'll like call something out for being super naturalistic. Like, man, I wish I had some good examples um, that they've picked up. But I think, frankly, what they're kind of saying is a lot of the film that's being produced these days is naturalistic, and whatever the plot is, the kind of portrayal is always kind of like, oh, make sure we account for the fact that they're eating dinner and going to the bathroom, and there's some they don't like it when something's like unrealistic, and that's where your distinction's right on the point. It's not about realism; it's about expressing ideals through a character, and if that takes on whatever something that breaks the laws of physics or is that's not even really what it's about. Realistic as though you couldn't imagine someone living that life. Well, that's the whole point. This is a romantic version of it. This is the ideal. So no one's going to truly be, I forget the Atlas characters, Harry or Henry, but you can still aspire to capture some of their character in your own life. And
yeah,
I think that's a great way. That's what art should be doing.
For sure. Like
we're losing that shows that, I don't know, there's not as much to go out there and enjoy.
Yeah, and I remember in high school I got assigned John Steinbeck, Grapes of Wrath, and like that book was just so naturalistic and so pointless.
Yes.
And it was just terrible. It was terrible art, and I hated reading that book so much. And then it was just so amazing. Once I can read stuff on my own, I can read like Rand and Dostoevsky and all like the good romantic authors who like have interesting characters and like the plot moves forward with every line rather than just like building some naturalistic world that just is supposed to be realistic, but it's not interesting. And
it's super easy to see, or at least it's super obvious in literature, just because you have to kind of go through the world, and if what you're imagining ends up being mundane or boring is what you're getting at, then it doesn't even become enjoyable art. It's not readable. Like what you said, every line should push the plot forward, and the dialogue should express an ideal in these characters. So Rand's a good example, but obviously a very philosophical one. I'm glad you mentioned Dostoevsky to kind of draw a connection and look at that. I haven't read too much of his. I think I read a little bit of the brothers Karamazov, but honestly I thought it was a little thick, dense, hard to read. I like more pop fiction, like who would I like a Kurt Vonnegut or a what's that guy? Oh, now I'm just blanking on names. But Kurt Vonnegut's a favorite, and then I like a lot of sci-fi, so your Asimovs and all that. Do you like, what else do you like besides Dostoevsky? Looking for some common ground here.
Ooh, I don't know. I read like all the books that I read. I read like very thick stuff and try to read classics, so I don't get through as much as other people do. I'm a fairly slow reader too, so I haven't read as many fiction books as I would have liked to. But I have the brothers up there on my shelf, and then I'm reading Crime and Punishment right now.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, you hear a lot about, that's the other thing I was going to say, is like online right now, you actually hear Dostoevsky getting some praise, and I didn't hear as much of that when I was in high school because of the whole Jordan Peterson thing, frankly. He's a big fan. So a lot of people are reading him. PewDiePie put him on his book club or whatever. And when you mentioned Dave Rubin mentioning Ayn Rand, I'm just thinking about how those particular outlets, at least, didn't exist when I was in high school. But it was around the same time that I'm just imagining that I was in college picking up the exact same stuff. So we're basically on the same time frame as far as, the internet, the Trump movement brought out this huge, let's say, anti-establishment world, and people kind of got their thoughts from different thought leaders between the Dave Rubin's, Ben Shapiro's, and then the Young Turks left side. People are kind of forming these ideas, and it looks like we basically picked up on the same vibe, or at least some similar content creators between Peterson and Rubin. And well, I mean, definitely lends itself towards a pretty similar shared ideology.
Yeah,
but
I mean, there's definitely differences between a lot of Rand and libertarianism and that sort of stuff. Because
it's one of those, you know, it's been a long time nemesis between the two camps, and it's, I think, a good example of an infighting where we're obviously more similar to ourselves than to each other than to like 99% of the political movements out there, but like wanting to parse over specific details like justifications is certainly something that is going to cause arguments. Basically, no one's arguing this stuff with us because we're, you know, messing with them when it comes to like minimum wages and gender pay gaps and the whole political establishment, you know, whatever. There's that's where our time is spent with those people. But when you find someone you agree with all that stuff about, you have to find, well, what don't you agree about? Well, it comes down to some, I would say, pretty nuanced, esoteric things. And it's like when you were doing some of that Rand explanation, I think you even paused in your video and you're like, you guys, this is like really hard to like parse through. Like just it comes down to like what these words mean and like what are words and definitions. And you're right. Yeah. It's like one of the most nuanced things.
I think ultimately, like, ethics is probably one of the biggest determinings of what the future is going to be and or how history unfolds. So the ethical system that you hold is fundamentally like super important when it comes to what philosophical system or political system you will be upholding, I guess.
Right. I guess that's what I'm curious about, because I do recognize the difference in our justifications. And just for any audience trying to pick up on this, you mentioned, well, I'll give kind of the Rothbardian justification for private property and individualism, and then you can give a Rand point of view. But I do want to see if this also has implications for the consequences. Like, oh, do we see a different political solution and maybe like a individualist solution? Like, what should we be doing in our day-to-days? And if you have differences in opinion there, that's what I'm all about hearing. These little, minute, let's say, I think they're kind of minute philosophical disagreements. I don't think are the end-all be-all, but if you're saying that they have these implications, well, maybe we can see some of that. But let's spell it out for each other in the audience. I'll start. We just believe in self-ownership. That's kind of all you need to get everything else. It is axiomatic in that, to believe in self-ownership is kind of self-evident. Probably the obvious, or at least the thing that we all point to as evidence, the fact that each human has unique bodily control, autonomy over their body. So since they're the only person, they have an exclusive command over their body. Since they're the only person that can do that, they're the best, say, steward of that resource. They're the best controller, and we can then say owner. Ownership just has a couple of things. Basically, it's a right, your property norm that needs to be respected. And the idea is anyone that's not willing to respect self-ownership or your own private property from there is going to be inviting conflict. And that conflict's the inevitable conflict over scarce resources, like your one and single body. And unless we can say at least you is yours and me is mine and you is yours, you're always going to have the inevitable conflict of someone trying to control over others and actually having a claim to saying, oh no, your body does belong to either a ruler, a king, or the collective, all of us. And that leads to all kinds of zany consequences. Like I said, inevitable and continual conflict. Whereas if we first all, I would say, understand that we all own ourselves, and then from there we can catapult that into you own the products of your labor and so on and so forth, all the fun economics that come from that. But those are the primary justifications, is again the physical control over the body, which we represent as an ownership and therefore property norm.
All right. So for me, I guess the Randian sort of argument for individual rights basically starts with the right to life, which the right to an individual to live their own life, to pursue their own life. That because life is ultimately the standard of what is good. Since, I mean, in ethics, you have an ethical system so that you can make choices about what actions are proper, and ultimately the standard for that is life. So you start with the right to life. That's pretty much the axiomatic concept. So the question is, how do humans live? Humans live by their means of survival is the mind. So they need to be free to think for themselves, since reason is an individual faculty. They need to be free to think for themselves and act for themselves, and then ultimately, since they have a physical body, basically to keep the rights of what they act and think about, which would be property rights. So I mean, that's a quick explanation of it.
I like that you went through it quickly there, and I don't know, just hearing it when you said it sounds pretty similar. I mean, the right to life and self-ownership might be two sides of the same coin. In fact, when you went on to say that happiness is like the true ideal, I just think that's one step further than self-ownership. I think self-ownership is, yes, the right to life and the pursuit of happiness, but that's what I'm encapsulating in that word. Again, you're free from people dominating over you, saying that they have somehow control or exclusive or shared control over your body and your resources. The alternative is to say, no, each person has a right to their life, a right to determine what they think is best use of their resources, starting with their body, and to say, otherwise is unethical, I think is the position we're going for, a position on ethics. And I don't know, where are you on like just to kind of jump around a little bit, where are you on like the is-ought gap? Do you think that's like a serious philosophical problem?
I don't necessarily think it's super important of a philosophy. It's one that I think Rand kind of solved, because there are facts of reality, and those facts basically tell you what you ought to do when you think about them and integrate them in your mind.
Yeah, I'll tell you, the solution from our end has just been to give a conditional statement. We say, if you want peace and prosperity, then you should value, let's just say, private property or individual freedom. And they're both true statements. So those are true statements that don't have an is-ought gap. They're just conditional. What do you think about that solution? Because when you said that, Rand solved them, I agree with you. I think that you're able to go from axioms, whichever one you want, to ethical judgments pretty quickly based on what you said, that these things are kind of the pursuit of the goods in the world as far as we know them. I don't think we're making too much of a jump at all.
So I'm not necessarily sure about the whole, like, if you want this, then you ought to do this thing. I view life as more of an objective sort of standard of value, because in life there's this objective potential for happiness, which I view as ultimately what you're pursuing, what the ultimate good sort of is, which would be like the purpose of life, essentially.
Right. I mean, forgive me to be kind of harsh towards this definition of happiness, but I mean, don't you just feel like what you're encapsulating in happiness is something else? Like if someone was to tell you, hey, I get a lot of pleasure out of going to the casino and dropping a paycheck at the slot machine. I lose all the money, but those bells and whistles, they really have my adrenaline going and my, dopamine flowing. You'd be like, that's not the kind of happiness I'm talking about. But I mean, those are at least some uses of the word. Now, what I'm warning you of, or what I fear, is that sometimes when you're using happiness, you kind of want to make people go back to just like, oh yeah, I'm enjoying this moment. I have pleasure in this time. But the definition of happiness you're really working with is more of a just idea of self-ownership, or a pursuit of happiness, in that you have your own body to control. That's what you're kind of defining as happiness. I don't know. Is it kind of begging the question, or kind of using a slippery definition?
I don't know how you're applying self-ownership in this context. I think happiness is an objective sort of emotion. It's not something that is like you can just get it wherever you want, and there's like certain principles that are involved in happiness, and like happiness is this feeling of uncontradictory joy. It can't contradict your life. It can't contradict reality. Otherwise, it's not a long-term feeling of happiness. It's not real happiness in a sense.
I know, but that's the danger, is if you're looking at feelings of elation or yeah, just bliss, and you're kind of counting those out as, oh, they're contradictory joys,
Not
then
they're those aren't necessarily contradictory joys, though. I think as long as those like feelings of bliss and those sort of things, they can, as long as they're not contradicting your life as a whole and your overall happiness. I view happiness not as an emotion, more as like an underlying sort of thing that leads to feelings of pleasure throughout life, and that's because that's ultimately like what it happiness comes out as, is feelings of pleasure. But it's a more long term, uncontradictory one, and it's like more, it's more than just like physical. There's a sense in which it's spiritual. I'm not religious, so I'm not that sort of like religious spirit, but like the consciousness, the idea, the feeling, the mental feeling of things. I don't know how I'm using very confusing words right now, but I think that's
so you might be capturing something that I'm not, because what I basically think about as this kind of happiness, again, I call it pursuit of happiness, just in line with Locke and our founders, to be whatever, mix into the popular jargon. The pursuit of happiness is like a choice, and you can choose like not to pursue happiness, and that's actually really okay with our system, my system of belief, because I would just say, hey, that is absolutely their demonstrated preference to not, become their ultimate expression and not do all these things. Oh, they're hurting themselves, but if they ultimately chose to, I don't think anyone but them is better to say what's best for themselves. So to handicap other people's expressions of happiness with your own definition puts you at risk of, I don't know, facilitating happiness on the part of an unwilling populace, or maybe, I don't know.
Sure. I'd view that as immoral if you're not pursuing happiness ultimately as the end, since you're contradicting your own life and not acting in a rationally self-interested way. However, I don't think that you need to get the government involved in that sense, because I think force is far worse, because you, like, when you're under duress, when you're under force, you like cannot achieve happiness because you're not using your own mind and you're not living your own life. You're ultimately forced to be a parasite, essentially.
Right. So I think that's the quick and easy justification to say that government is immoral, is because it prevents people from pursuing happiness, whether or not they actually end up doing it. Let's say we give all these people freedom, and it turns out, oh, they didn't actually use it to the fullest extent. Maybe even they were better off as a government, welfare recipient, or at least they would have preferred it individually. I don't know. I still recognize the government as a perverse thing, and the justification is simply that it stops people from being allowed to do something. The positive, hey, you need to do this to be moral, that's fine, in fact, but I don't think it really mixes into the argument for, I don't know, our justifications here. Correct me where I'm wrong.
There's a lot to respond there. So I think that government is still necessary, essentially, because it can prevent, like, the goal of government, from my perspective, is to extract force from society. I don't view it as like something that comes in and initiates force necessarily. So I would advocate for ultimately a government that like monopolizes force and keeps it out of society.
Right. I mean, you potentially describing it as like a voluntary government, though. And is that true? Like, would you say that you don't have to participate, or do you have to?
Not necessarily I mean, it's not really a voluntary government. You pay taxes voluntarily, but you're still like you're still bounded by the rules. Like, you can't use force on another person. Otherwise, you have the government that comes in and responds and puts you in prison or something like that.
Right. Right. So there's those government consequences. I get that, but I don't really see why we'd have to leave it to a government. I mean, isn't there already like a pretty vested interest in people not committing aggressive violence on their property or near them?
Not necessarily. I mean, how do you enforce that? That's my question. How would you respond to initiation of force? Because there's going to be people that are going to initiate force on other people because they'll want something they have, and they're not acting rationally, and they'll just take someone's property or something. So how do you respond to that?
Yeah, well, that person creates a legal liability for themselves that anyone can collect on, right? I mean, they don't have property rights the same way you or I do as a peaceful person. They're a violent person, so anyone basically can take them down. And in that creates an opportunity for a service to be rendered. In the same way hungry people need or want cheeseburgers, people who don't want to get beat up want someone to discipline or take control over irrationally violent people.
I mean, but I mean, ultimately, that is just rule of force. Then it's just whoever can get enough force behind what they believe, and just wipe
Well,
out anyone
how do
else
you
who
believe
doesn't.
in not being aggressive? Because you're saying
Then
you
those
get
people are going
you.
to get fucked in an anarchist system.
Well, I think that the accumulation of that, let's say, power to control over violent people comes from your ability to give out good consequences with the power that they've already seized. Like, it's like, hey, these guys have a lot of guns and they're using them terribly. Well, then they're enemy number one, and anyone should band together to take them out. Whereas if they're providing a service, if they're keeping bad people off the street, who cares how big they grow? In the same way, I don't care how many fryers McDonald's has because they're providing a service at the end of the day. So you're saying it's stronger you are, the more you have. I'm the other way around. The more you're able to serve people, that's going to create the prosperity and the room for you to grow. You're not going to grow off violent, or I should say, aggressively violent actions. You're going to grow off helping people out and being a service in your society, like all the
That's
other big businesses are.
that's
Anyone that
not
achieves
necessarily
success.
true, because people are going to have different ideas about what they want, like as the standard of what the law should be and what should be enforced and what shouldn't be. So then they'll like break off into different groups that'll enforce this sort of stuff, and that just becomes gang warfare essentially. And just whoever can accumulate the most power gets their sort of rights protected, and anyone else will just be fucked pretty
Oh,
much.
I don't know, because it's not so clear. So let's say someone thinks that they have a right over someone else's property, a positive right. I don't know, right to health care. So they're gonna
Mm-hmm.
enlist some doctors to take care of them, even though those doctors don't want to do it. Okay, well, it's pretty easy to see who the bad person is, and on some level, we are appealing to the fact that moral intuitions are with us. We don't, in our own day-to-day life, use aggression to achieve our ends. And I think if it wasn't for the title of government, the costumes they wear on and the badge on their chest, people would recognize government agents when they're doing right and when they're doing wrong. It's kind of an easy judgment to make without the authority resting over them, without the monopoly. We simply just say, are they doing good or bad? Are they helping or hurting? Are they initiating the violence, or are they settling it down? With cops, you get in this murky area where, of course, they're initiating the violence, but you have to backtrack and say, but they're the only ones that do it, so it's this, justified thing.
I don't think I don't think government necessarily initiates violence. So I think we need to establish a sort of like legal document, like similar to a constitution. That's why I'm in favor of ultimately like a constitutional type government that says that no, the government can't initiate force. Its job is to prevent the initiation of force between other people in society.
Right. Well, okay. So just to follow that through, let's say we live under such a society, and you agree I don't have to pay the taxes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then let's say I think that this company is doing a good ADT. They're protecting houses, okay? And every once in a while they'll send over a guy if I think that I'm in imminent danger. Are you going to prevent this service from popping up on the market?
No, as long as it's not violating anyone's rights, then the government can
Okay, well
stay
then
on
if
it.
it's voluntary, then who's to say the government's going to even win this battle? Why isn't my guy potentially going to seize a bigger market than the government, collect more taxes since they're voluntary than the government does, since he's better at protecting property than they are?
I mean, there's nothing that's really saying that that can't happen, but that ultimately, I don't think that that would happen because you need some larger authority to
Right.
basically prevent like insurrections or prevent rights from being violated. So, I mean, maybe that company could rise up and become a government, but I can't see that really
Right.
happening.
As
I
long as
can't.
you're distinguishing governance, and this is what we're talking about now, since it's all voluntary from government, then ultimately we agree we just have different predictions. And yeah, I'm like 100% sure that the market is going to beat the government because, I mean, look, it's the government, or let me put it this way. If the government really is voluntary and that they have to achieve benefit functions into society in order to get paid, if they have to convince their customers, well, then I just don't see them as a government anymore. I just think they're the company. again, if it's voluntary and you have competing organizations, there's going to be plenty of them. I don't see a problem with the duplicity either. Again, the one guy protecting my house, what if it's just me? You know, I have my own self-protection or whatever. So that's infringing on this monopoly of violence or force, if you want to put it that way. It's okay, though. We can have plenty of competing spheres, and as long as they're all voluntary, then the size of them isn't really an issue. The prediction that one's going to be really big, I think, is a little foolhardy. I mean, they have to protect their monopoly. They have to indoctrinate kids to have it. They have to steal money to pay for it. The fact that if they couldn't do those things, do you think they'd really pull it off?
Well, I mean, they have to like steal money right now because of the size and scope of the current sort of system. But I think in one where it's just limited to protecting individual rights, you also need to have one like objective sort of law that everyone can follow. You can't have different competing companies with different sets of laws, because then you don't know how to think long range, and you don't know how to follow all these different competing laws.
Anything else is a mistake. You know, it's like, that's what the fear I had with your whole happiness thing is, are we going to enforce this morality on anyone? You said no, which makes me, feel better about it. But as far as laws, if there's no question, all you need, don't steal. Tells them all.
That's not true at all. I mean, how do you, like, there's a lot more to law. How do you ensure that, like, libel doesn't happen or slander and shit like that? Like, how do you?
You don't own your reputation. If people want to talk shit about you, then you should just defend yourself.
Or not that fuck. What is it? When you lie about what is it called when you lie about a fucking a product before you sell it, and then someone buys
fraud.
It? Yeah, fraud.
Buyer beware. Buyer beware. If you're gonna buy a product, you should be aware of what you're doing. If you're gonna ingest something, you should basically know what it is.
Okay, but
look, it's not like people are going to have to individually do it. There's going to be a huge interest in this, which will create a market incentive. In the same way there's an FDA, there'll be an FDA that is paid for voluntarily. People want these services.
Sure, I agree with that, but you can also just completely lie about something, and that's a violation of someone's rights.
Right, that's pretty sick that we're going to outlaw lying.
No, like,
because I'm the arbiter of truth.
You can't If you can't not sell what you say that you're going to sell. If you say you're going to sell someone something and they give you money in return, that's theft if you don't give them that thing. If you
not
don't
really,
give them what they ask for.
I mean, every transaction I've ever been a part of, I have the product when I hand over the cash. I mean, this guy's an idiot. He gave down cash to some scammer. I'm not like,
Do you
look.
not use Amazon?
What's that?
Do you not use Amazon? Because Amazon, you pay them.
That's a good point. With Amazon, they have escrow. I know that if this guy doesn't send me my product, I'm going to get it back. You can have lots of services that make sure that people are going to get their stuff. You don't have to rely on the word of one guy. I mean, that's a huge mistake. If you get fraud because some guy lied to you, I frankly don't feel bad. That's like a guy getting hit up by a Nigerian scammer that says they can get all these fortunes by sending them a Western Union payment. What, we're supposed to pay that guy back because he fell for it? Yeah, people lie. But the key is to not fall for lies and create places where you can shop where you probably won't get lied to. Amazon with their customer reviews is a great example of a solution that doesn't require any enforcement whatsoever.
Sure, but there's still the potential for some sort of lying, and I think that's where the government needs to get involved. I'd rather the liars
get away with lying than we stop letting people talk. It's pretty dangerous.
That's very literally theft, because you're giving them money and you're not giving them what they asked for in return.
They voluntarily gave them the money. That's the difference. If it's theft, they took the money.
No, but they took the money on a false pretense of not actually giving them in return.
Then they should have got their ducks in a row before they hand over the cash. If you've ever played a game like RuneScape, there's no money back guarantee. What if we move into a Bitcoin universe? There's no chargebacks. We can't rely on people to be honest. You have to have some responsibility when you're about to give someone money, that you make sure that you're not being scammed. It's not that hard. I mean, most people get through most of their transactions without being scammed, and every once in a while they get scammed and they say, oh, why did I believe that guy? That's the number one mistake. They believe somebody. Well, people lie. That's a fact that we should.
I mean, that's obviously a violation of rights. I mean,
not as bad as taking out a liar and putting him in jail. That's a violation of rights.
How? It's just they stole from somebody though. That's
what's that?
They literally stole from somebody. They took their money on a false pretense.
Literally stealing is when you take something without their consent. This is where they got something with their.
They didn't properly consent though, because they didn't have the full knowledge. Do you believe in pedophilia?
All you need for the consent is the demonstrated abandonment of the property. The fact that the guy now has control over their resources means they consented. The fact that they made a mistake isn't really our job to lock people up over, initiate violence over. I mean, look, I do have to say that fraud is one area where I disagree with most, like, just everyone about. I'm like probably the only libertarian you'll find that say that fraud isn't a principle that we need in society. But I think I got this one. I think this is a contribution that lying cannot be made illegal. If we're using violence against liars, we're the assholes.
Oh God. I mean, it's very literally. I mean, I'm just going to keep repeating myself, but it's like,
is a Nigerian scammer emailing someone and telling them to fork over $20,000 theft? Is that literally stealing? It's
yes.
not. There's a difference. Being conned deals with confidence and that consent that you had the confidence. Now you lose that confidence when you don't get the product. But that was a mistake. The fact you change your mind doesn't take away the consent that you had in the first place.
That's still theft when the Nigerian scammer does that. They're taking your money that you, and they're not giving you in return what you asked for, though. That's the thing. It's still like capitalism based on win-win transactions.
Let me walk through this example. I tell you right now, if you send me $100 on PayPal, I'll instantly triple it and give you $300 back. And then let's say you just were like, all right, what's your PayPal address, Zach? And I'll like, here it is. And you sent me the $100. Is anyone going to feel bad when I don't send you $300? Like, are you really comfortable sending, violent men to take me out? I mean, it's your mistake. It was a dumb move. You shouldn't believe random people on the internet.
See, it was a stupid move, but it's still a violation of rights. Capitalism is based on win-win transactions.
If it really is a violation of rights, can you at least appreciate that someone knocking on my door and taking me out because I took your $100 is also a violation of my right to be in a kind of fallacious, scammy business? I mean, maybe every second person I give them $300, whatever. That's just my game.
I mean, it wouldn't necessarily be like them coming to your door and putting you in prison. Like there's different degrees for different things. I mean, obviously, if you don't agree to that, then they're going to have to come and do that. But
okay, well, I mean, then whose really rights are being violated? The guy that's an idiot, or the guy that just took advantage of an idiot? I think taking advantage of idiots is market function.
It's still you were the one that initiated force in that context, though. Force?
I mean, come on, you sent me the $100. You got to be a little bit more precise with the word force. I mean, that's what we're debating about. When should you use force? And we're not talking about when you should ask people for cash. I mean, that's not force. It's literally the opposite of force. You gave me.
But you're asking for it. You're asking for it under a false pretense. You're violating ultimately that person's ability to make their own decisions. There's
an easy solution to this from the buyer's perspective. Escrow. You just get a third party that says, look, I'll send you the $100, but you don't give it to him until he gives you the $300. And once you have both, you send them out. That's what Amazon does, basically.
Sure. So I have no problem with that, but I think still in that case.
There's the solution. The solution is not to knock on my door.
No, I'm not saying it's a smart decision. I'm saying that in that context, it's still a violation of rights that you need someone.
Not really. I mean, I don't think that bears out. I think there's so many mechanisms that a reasonable buyer can use. I mean, we all agree that 99.9% of transactions are not fraudulent, so we all know how to get along without getting scammed. The few times that we do get scammed, it's our fault. That's what we have to appreciate. When we get scammed, it's our fault. We consented to something that in the future we realize we shouldn't have consented to. But back then, we consented to it. That was our mistake.
It's stupid, but it's still a violation of rights, though.
No. You know what? No.
It's still someone taking your money under a false pretense.
Yeah, I'll go further with you. It's the opposite of a violation of rights. Imagine if you gave me that $100, right, for the $300 back. That's our deal. And then let's say that you think that your rights are so violated, right, that you get the $100 back. You say, I shouldn't have done this, or it was a mistake. I was supposed to get the $300. I didn't get it. I need this $100 back. My rights were so violated. And then you do whatever thing happens. They knock on my door. Maybe I'm just being generous and I get the first letter and I send you the $100 back. But I also sent you the $300 because maybe it was an actual transaction. Now are we supposed to unwind this all and I'm supposed to get my $300 back? Because not every, let's just put it this way. Every transaction has the potential of fraud, but we risk that we might get ripped off, but we're pretty sure that this is going to go well. And then we can judge based on are we getting the product as we hand over the cash, like in a market, or are we trusting a third place online dealer? Well, if we are, maybe you should choose a big one like Amazon. But if we're on some sketchy website sending over cash to some guy that promised them riches I have no sympathy. I don't even think their rights are being violated. I think their rights are being expressed in their mistake. They wanted to get conned. They wanted to do this stupid service, and the fact that they shouldn't have wanted that from our perspective, that's just us telling them what they want. Their demonstrated preference was this was the best thing for them. The false pretense is the fact that they didn't understand everything that was happening in the world. Well, no one does. That's the risk that everyone endeavors in when they take part in a transaction.
No, but like capitalism is based on your knowledge of and making win-win reactions.
Knowledge, but not complete knowledge. I mean, look, everyone's bought.
No, you're not going to have complete knowledge, but you need to be able to make win-win transactions.
Up to your expectation, you didn't pick up as many chicks as you thought with the Corvette. Are we supposed to give that guy his money back? I mean, the line's impossible to draw. What's fraud? I mean,
because you got what you asked for, though. You got what you asked for in the transaction.
I mean, what if he said 100% you're going to get laid when you buy this car, and then he buys it and he doesn't get laid? Are we supposed to? Is that fraud? Is that what you're saying?
No,
false
because you got the car that you asked for. You didn't get the results of the car that was produced.
But he said 100% if you buy this car. I mean, that's part of the deal.
I mean, that's a lie, though. That's also a lie.
Okay, these are all lies, but they're not. His rights weren't violated when he bought with the car.
That's questionable advertising practices, but I'm not sure that, like, if there should be a fine at all, it should even be like that big.
There shouldn't be a fine at all, because if there is, I could always say no to it, and what, you're going to extract it using violence? You're the right. I mean, the rights violation's way more obvious in that case. That's literally theft. Is I'm sitting here and they're taking it. I'm saying, no, it's my money. Whereas you are like, here's the $100.
No, but
that's the opposite of
you're not getting it in a win-win transaction, though. You're not. You
thought it was.
You consented to a win-win transaction, but you didn't consent to the transaction that actually took place.
The beauty of capitalism is that most people are smart enough, that's kind of the human thing, and self-interested enough that they're able to discern a mutually beneficial transaction. Sometimes, though, people make mistakes. That's buyer's remorse, and it's being defrauded. But in both cases...
That's not buyer's remorse. If you objectively don't get the thing that you asked for, then it's not buyer's remorse. Then it's theft.
But there's obvious solutions to this. I mean, again, like, what if, I promise you, a guitar, and you send me the cash. Like right now, hey, if you send me $100, I'll give you a guitar. If you sent me $100 on PayPal, is anyone going to feel bad when I don't send you a guitar?
Yes, because you literally took my money without giving me the guitar that you promised.
We're discussing the idea that potentially you can get ripped off on the internet. I mean, the context makes it pretty obvious.
No, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. That's the thing.
I got a piano. There's no guitar.
No, I mean,
it's not. I mean, come on.
Obviously, I wouldn't do that because I'm not fucking stupid. But
exactly. So the people that do, let's not protect them. Their rights are not.
No, but it's still a rights violation because you're getting it under. We're just repeating ourselves at this point, but I don't think
look, they have every opportunity to understand the context. They can get more information. Part of capitalism is that we make informed buying decisions. That's how you get those mutually beneficial transactions.
Sure, I agree that that's a good thing.
What's best for themselves.
But I agree that that's a good thing. But there's still a potential for the fact that someone's going to get defrauded, that someone's going to get frauded, and someone's going to.
And that's fine.
Someone's going to make a trade, and they're not going to get. They didn't consent to not getting anything back from the trade.
And I'm confident enough that there will be enough systems in place to prevent this. That those few instances where it happens, we just have to laugh at ourselves and be like, "Damn, I shouldn't have believed that guy with the guitar." That it's always the buyer's mistake. That's where I come down on this.
I mean, what if it's something bigger than that? Like, what if there's something a lot bigger than that? You make a transaction and you don't get in return. What do you do about that in an anarchist society? I
don't get it. That's the whole thing. No one's expecting you to get your money back. There's no chargebacks.
Okay, what happens if somebody comes and steals from your house? How do you enforce that in an anarchist system?
That guy has now exposed himself to the legal liability of being able to seize his property violently. He doesn't have the same defense principles that we do because he's a violent perpetrator.
Okay, then what if he has like a gun and more guns and more force than everyone else has? Or what if he's like a member of what if he's a member of like a big police type private company or whatever your solution would be, and then he has them just get behind him and fight back? How do you prevent that? There's nothing that you can do to prevent that.
Literally what we have today with the cops. I mean, so you're not really describing a problem we don't have.
No, I mean, but at least we have like the potential to create some better system. Yeah,
the potential is to get rid of the cops and let anyone who wants to do it.
You have to. You still have to have some law that you enforce and some way to perform.
The law is don't hit, don't steal. That's what we were talking about. And then I don't know how to.
how do you
actually
protect those rights? How do you protect those rights?
By enforcing them violently.
Yeah, and so you need some mechanism of force or some
And if you
larger
use it
mechanism
on
of force
people
to do
that
that.
didn't initiate violence, you're the asshole. Like people who lie.
Yeah, I'd agree. That's not true because in that sense you are initiating force because you're causing a transaction that someone didn't
I
consent
mean,
to.
there's a pretty obvious line where force is drawn, and it's physical. You know. I mean, come on. If they're consenting to the
There's more to
transaction,
force than
literally
just.
the opposite of being forced.
There's more to force than just physical. It's making someone not unable to follow
Yes, I agree.
the actions of their mind.
Yeah, threats of force, can carry as much, weight behind them as a punch. Sure. Okay, but fraud, threatening people with violence is fine. Threatening with fraud, that's not even a thing. Hey, I'm gonna rip you off. I mean, oh, don't fall for my next scam. Like, what are you even talking? There's fraud is a totally different thing. It's just lying. Saying your girlfriend looks hot in a ugly dress. I mean, look, these things aren't
different because you're not promising them something that they'll get if they cause a transaction.
Okay, but I mean, a promise is just words. I mean, you gotta respect that words aren't always true.
Sure,
you know what's real is
you're
the
acting
product.
under the assumption that they're true.
Then I can give them the cash, no sweat. I don't have to worry about believing somebody. I mean, it's kind of self-evident in the way that market transactions go.
You definitely do have to worry about believing somebody in a market transaction. What if it's the other way around? What if it's the other way around? The seller gives the person the product and the person just runs away with it without paying for it.
That's their problem. They got scammed. I'm not supposed to feel bad for this guy.
No. That's literally theft. That's going to the store and taking going to the fucking gas station to grabbing a fucking candy bar for $3 and running out. Like there's no difference between that. That's literally theft. But you could go up to the gas register and say,
"He never handed him the candy bar." Dude.
No, you could go up to the cash register and give it to the cashier and be like, "Okay, they scan it up and they hand it back," and you grab it and just run away.
Wait, walk me through this transaction one more time.
Okay, you go up to the candy bar, you take it to the front counter, hand it to the person. They run it, beep it, and then you just grab it, take it, and just run away. What? Like that's the same thing.
What they do. Do they leave it where they can't get it grabbed?
No, they can just grab it and take it away.
All right. So walk me through it. They rung it up and they put it back on the counter, and then you grab it and run.
Yep.
That's stealing.
Why is that any different from the fraud example? Because you started a transaction.
It's their property. You're on their property. It's pretty obvious.
You started a transaction.
Let me ask this question: does anyone get defrauded in their house? Like someone comes over, I'm going to sell you this car, and then they hand them the cash, and then they just live in this house and never give them the car. No, if they're on the property, they can get the cash back. I mean, as soon as you let them leave the property with the item, now you're defrauded. That's the difference. If they left the store, and the guy was like, "Have a good day," I wouldn't feel bad for the guy.
So once they leave the store with the candy bar, then it's okay.
You can't leave until you pay. That's stealing.
So once you have the candy bar off the premises, then it's okay. Then they can do nothing about it.
As long as they gave it to you, but I don't really see any situation where you're talking about anyone giving it to them.
Okay, wait. What was the house example that you were going through? Let's say, I don't remember the specifics of it. Sorry.
You sit there and you're like, hey, here's a car for $10,000, and the thing is, if you let me leave.
Okay, so let's say the person comes to your house, walks in, and then you give them the $10,000 for the car, and they just take it and just run away, and you can't do anything about it.
I mean, how fast are they running? I mean, it's your house. They're literally...
Okay, let's say you can't catch them. They find a way to escape. It'd be the same as with the candy bar. They found a way to escape and get off the property.
And you literally handed them the cash, and
you handed them just like they handed you the candy bar. Just like they handed you the candy bar.
Keys present, or why'd you hand them the cash?
Just like it's the same thing with the candy bar because you didn't get the money back yet.
But hold on,
there's no difference between the two.
Candy bar is on the counter. Right? He's handing him the candy bar.
Yeah, he hands him back the candy bar. He's like, okay, now give me the cash.
That's not what they do. They don't hand him the candy bar. I've never even seen that.
Let's say they do, but that's still theft. If you don't think it's theft if they hand it, oh my gosh.
I mean, come on, the guy's an idiot. There's a reason they don't hand people candy bars because you wait for the cash. There's a very good reason you don't do it, and it's because you're exposing yourself to the risk that you're not going to get the cash.
There's no difference between if they hand it to them or if they set it down on the counter. It's the same.
It's the same big difference.
There's no.
Now, as far as how much, there's a big difference. If they hand it to them, then there's literally 0% chance that they could ever, stop them from having it. Where if they put it on the counter, they could be like, wait a second, man, you got to give me the money first. And they have some control over the object. Now,
I'm telling you, either way, if they hand you it back and you don't give them the money, it's still theft anyway. Anyone who's watching this knows that's obvious.
I mean, that's look. You're coming up with a good example. Theft or fraud. You maybe can convince me it's theft, but you're never going to convince me.
I'm saying fraud is theft. I'm saying fraud is essentially theft.
But this isn't fraud anymore. You're talking about some physical manifestation of taking someone's stuff. I mean, I'm not really for that. That's not really what I'm defending here. I'm defending lying.
It's the same thing. There's no difference in principle, because what you're agreeing. Let me finish. You're consenting to a certain transaction, right? And you don't actually, so then you give your side of the transaction, and the other person doesn't give you their side. It's the same principle in in everything that we've talked about.
Except for that, it's his property, dude. He's on the. I'm trying to square the circle, but there has to be some level where a property owner is responsible for their shit. If they leave, okay, so you're onto something here. I gotta think this through. Okay, so you're onto something here, but it becomes very, very close to the principle of abandonment. To be a property owner, you have to be able to control the resource. And if we're just laying it out there where anyone can grab it, and I agree, someone grabbing it might be immoral, but theft might not be the right word, because it's no longer the person's property if they're abandoning it in like a significant way. Now, the candy bar, I'm not willing to say that's abandonment and all that. I just think it's theft. I think if
I'd say
they grab it off the counter and run, it's pretty obvious to me it's not theirs, and the guy is kind of doing his. You're on something here.
So let's say that someone, they have their house, they leave their bike outside, and someone just comes by and just steals it. Is that theft?
Right. Yeah, it's stealing. Okay, it is stealing. But on some level, I don't feel that bad for the bike owner. I'm not gonna use violence against the guy who stole the bike. Honestly, it seems like the real bike violation would be to hurt the guy with the bike. Now,
I would definitely say that you need to go and steal the bike back. I'd say that'd be a role of government, because they stole the bike, and that's one thing where you need to have like a government to just come and take the bike back.
I'm thinking about it. If they need to take the bike back, let me think about that. Who's the asshole in that situation? The guy who took a bike off. You describe this to me. Is leaning against the house?
It's just leaning against the house. Yep.
All right. Yeah. No. Don't take it back, dude.
Yeah. So that's. I mean, these. But
I'm saying
do you see? But Robert, hold up. This goes back way to the point I was talking about before. Do you see how like force can be? Like what force is and what defines theft and what things can be is a little more nuanced than just don't hit and don't steal. Like there's a lot more nuance to this sort of stuff.
I never decided it was going to be easy. There's a role for Judge Judy to come and decide the outcomes of disputes. But the principle that she's guiding us by.
But what if you have competing Judge Judys, right? And then they have different interpretations of this law. How do you determine which one gets enforced?
All that matters is whichever one the parties agreed to go to.
How are both parties going to agree? What if they go and then they go to a judge and the judge says, and the judge sides with one party and the other one's like, hell no, I'm not doing that, and I'm going to go hire this force agency.
Because beforehand to be bound by the decision.
But why do you have to agree to it afterward? What enforces that?
Escrow.
What?
You have to have escrow. You got to have skin in the game. You have to say, I will agree to this decision, or else you can seize this property, or maybe even give them the property as escrow.
What if they say that? What if the judge sides with the other person, and the person's like, hell no, I'm not doing that, backing out of the contract, backing out of the escrow, and then they're like, I'm going to go and...
Right, the point of escrow, though, is they don't have possession of it anymore, so they can't do anything. That's the whole.
Okay, then what if they're like, no, this was violating my rights? So then they find this like force company, so to speak, or a police company or whatever it is, and they're like, no, I'm going to use you, and then I'm going to hire you guys out, and they're like, oh yeah, I agree with you. That was also a violation of your rights, and you go in and
we're not going to have a trial. They're just going to do it. I mean, come on. Yeah. Anyone that's respected is going to go through the due diligence of finding out the outcome and being like, no, we're not going to just trample over Judge Judy's decision. We have to solve this peacefully. I mean. If they didn't,
let's say there's so many different companies out here, right? There's so many different competing companies, right?
And they all have an interest in. And look, again, you can have lots of companies. All that matters is which one's the parties involved agree to. I don't need to be in the same company as some Chinese guy. All I care is that if I'm in a dispute, we can both say whatever she says goes. People do that all the time with their friends and relatives, and Judge Judy. The fact that right now we force them to go into the state court, that's just a mistake. We should let them choose.
No, because there needs to be an objective sort of laws, because you can't have whimsical law based on whatever Judge Judy says. Like that's just rule of people.
You're right about that, because a judge, in the word, is casting their opinion, okay, their judgment, and no, it's not legally binding. The entire world doesn't have to see that way. But you put mechanisms in place, like escrow, so that you make sure that the people that at least agreed to her decision that time go through with it. And if people think that was a bad
completely,
he's going to lose popularity in the long run. What you have is a system that guarantees the people that are the best at restoring property to the rightful owners and being the best at giving people outcomes that they can live with. Those are the people that are going to provide it, instead of just hoping that one service that we manifest as the courts, you do a good job. Of course you want competing agencies, in the same way I don't want one person providing me burgers.
No, how do you like ensure that there is one sort of objective law that gets followed throughout everybody, so that they know, so that people when they're thinking about things, thinking about how to act, they know what sort of laws to follow? How can people? No,
don't hurt, don't steal, and anyone that's not doing that would be obviously recognized as a herder or a stealer, unless they were given some kind of vested authority.
It's not obvious, though. We this is something that, like, half of our discussion was discussing different certain non-obvious thing. So I don't think theft is as obvious as possible, and there's a lot of rights violation is not super obvious.
You're mixing two arguments here. The fact that sometimes it's hard to parse what's theft and what's not isn't an argument over whether theft is wrong. We all agree theft is wrong.
Yeah, theft is wrong. But
so those are asking what rules should guide all these judges in society. Don't hurt, don't steal. And if there's specific nuanced things that are kind of confusing, can I shoot down a drone when it's in my neighbor's yard? Well, judges are going to render those opinions, and whichever ones that people agree with are the ones that are going to transpire in society.
Then you have a bunch of different judges who will respond a bunch of different ways of this nuance, and they'll judge with completely different principles, because reasonable people can disagree. Like, reasonable people can disagree with these sort of nuances, but then people don't know, like, how to act on certain things if they don't know like how specifically these judges are going to react to things.
Right.
There needs to be one standard. There needs to be one standard of law.
You're not eliminating complexity by putting it in words. We already appreciate how words get twisted, and there's lots of interpretations of laws that are kind of unobjective.
Sure, but there's one law. But there's only one law, and it's very much less up for interpretation than a bunch of different judges believing whatever their whims say.
It's unclear, first of all, that there's one law. First of all, you agree there's laws all over the world, so no one's doing this on a truly global scale. And then within a territory, you have a situation where there's different laws for different people. Cops can have 14 rounds in their mags, and civilians can't. So
I disagree with that, because I do believe in the principle of one rule of law, where the law applies equally to everybody.
Okay, well then what law are you talking about where we all have to go to this court? If the law applied equally, anyone could start a court. The fact that, let me ask this question. Are you saying we have to make sure there's one court, or are you just predicting there's going to end up with one court?
I'm not saying only one court. I'm saying one law that applies to each of these individual courts.
So my question is, are you saying it has to be that way, or are you predicting it's going to be that way?
I think that's the best way.
Right, but what if it is, what if people around you decide that they found a better way, which is letting people decide within themselves that best outcome for themselves and not really worry about what other people are doing?
What does that have to do with law? I agree with that principle.
Law would be an outcome rendered by a judge for their individual dispute. And yes, they can all recognize there's been other opinions cast on similar situations and use those to guide the case-by-case decisions that are made.
But then how do they know what the one objective law that they should follow is? Because if there's all these different competing sort of laws and that contradict each other, you're not going to necessarily know how to act in a certain situation.
Because the laws aren't competing, the judgments are competing. Who can best describe what's hurting and stealing in this situation? If there's no hurting and stealing, who's best able to explain why? Because those are the only things you should be worried about. If you're a judge that's ruling on things that aren't hurting and stealing, you're an asshole. What are you doing?
Yeah, okay, but and then why would they not be
Why?
successful?
Are they going to be judging online? You told her she looked hot. You're non-liking her picture on Instagram proved up. It's just
Sure,
the things you judge people
but like,
on
okay,
is
but
kind
what
of
prevents that? What prevents that from happening?
a judge from using violence against peaceful people. I mean, nothing. There's a violent government right now that's doing exactly that. But what we should try to do is not give someone the authority to use violence on peaceful people. Which is what
so then we create one standard. We will create one standard
that
ensures
don't hurt, don't steal, and
we create that one standard, right? And then you codify that in one sort of law, and then that law applies to everybody essentially.
I agree. Don't hurt, don't steal. Anything else?
But that's what you need a government for. You can't have
here's the thing about don't hurt, don't steal. If you don't abide by don't hurt, don't steal, you're going to break those first two rules. So I guess those laws don't apply to you if you're going to do something else.
What?
If you agree the first two, should we at least include within the laws don't hurt, don't steal?
Yeah, sure. I mean that's
okay, so then anything else will violate those two laws.
But there's a lot more to law than just don't hurt and don't steal.
They're all implications of those. If it's anything else, then it's hurting or stealing. Like marijuana laws. That's hurting. And tax laws, those are stealing.
I'd agree. I mean, yeah, but you need to.
The third one, the big debate is lying, and I'm kind of on the side.
No, I'd say lying. No, I'm not saying lying in general.
I know
lying with the consequences. Yeah. Okay.
Fraud.
Yeah. Fraud. I'd say if that falls under theft. That's my argument here.
Right, and that's my argument too, is that theft already covers all the things that you would really consider to be bad fraud. All the cons that people fall for, those aren't theft. Those are things we need to protect against. we could argue about this for another hour. Theft is the crime. Whether fraud is theft is the debate. Okay, but we agree theft is the crime.
Theft is a crime. But then you need some sort of law to apply to that. You need some sort of one. Because then how do you know how to act on this stuff? How do you know how to act in these situations?
For me,
how do you know how to avoid these laws? If it's all these different competing laws,
right?
How do you?
Right. I mean, basically, you have to live by the consequence in some respects. So you are kind of responsible to ascertain what's going to happen if I go through with something. Am I going to
How do you know the consequence if there's competing laws?
You look at the world around you. There's already competing laws. Blacks get treated differently than Asians. There's competing laws, and then you recognize that. So if you're black, you don't mouth off to cops as much. It's just that's how you have to kind of do. That's for being a person. I view
that as immoral. That's not a moral thing.
Right, and what I'd rather have is a situation where at least the laws are closer to the truth, but you still need to recognize, hey, not all laws get applied equally. Every single case is different. We just live in a world where there's different people. You can't expect the exact same outcome. So you make a bold risk and you say, I'm going to do this, and I don't think I'm going to get arrested for fraud. And maybe I shouldn't have asked for that $100 for the guitar, because if I end up in jail, I guess I misunderstood the situation that I was in. But at the end of the day, it's everybody's responsibility to figure out what's wrong and not. I mean,
sure, but then there's all these different situations and all these different laws, and how do you
you
agree that it's wrong? You agree that it's wrong in the current situation that blacks or Asians and all these people are treated differently under the law, right? You agree that that's immoral, right?
Yeah, we should all be treated equally under the law, including the government. And I'm saying that anything besides outlawing, hurting, and stealing.
How is there any equality under the law? There's competing different laws.
The first two. What? It gives them an exception. It gives them an exception to the first two. They're allowed to hurt and steal in the enforcement of laws that aren't against hurting and stealing.
But there's still all these, you have all these. How do you apply a law objectively? I don't get how that's not completely whimsical.
That's kind of the goal. Is you look at something like theft and you say, how can we objectively say? Now, a good place to start is private property. We don't live in a world where everything is owned by individuals, so it makes it really hard. Is welfare theft, is an immigrant coming over and taking and using the playground theft. I mean, I'm not going to, it's hard to debate. We just live in such a complex world. And one of the things that would make a lot of these things easier is you start relegating property to individual owners, and then it kind of solves itself.
Sure, but okay, how do you do that? How do you relegate property to individual owners without some sort of government that recognizes who owns what property?
Well, again, starting with self-ownership, it comes from bodily control. Then, when it comes to your property beyond that,
what if there's some judge what if there's some judge and enforcement agency that it thinks that this one person owns this property, but then a different one's like, no, there's no way, that doesn't make any sense. This other group owns this property.
Yeah,
then what happens? Do they what happens in that sense?
you appreciate that right now two parties can have that dispute, and then the government's going to rule on some guy's favor, and it's going to piss off the other party, right? Like, and,
Yeah,
and
no, I
literally,
agree with that. But then you don't have like a whole like big war between two enforcement agencies over that. I mean, that's how war happens. Because if you look at the world, oh shit, my battery's running low. If you look at the world, like the global scale, like everything is anarchy. And then if there's a certain country that has some dispute over land with another country, that's how wars start.
Not always. I mean, that's actually kind of a misunderstanding of war. It's like most wars over property that is already owned. Okay? I mean, there are these tracts of land that have created dispute, but for the most part, first come, first serve. I mean, that's basically the solution.
Sure, but but what if you're like, even if it's completely wrong, completely arbitrary, what if you, with all this force behind you, backing behind you, say, no, this is my property, and it's completely wrong. Let's say it's completely wrong, but then this other person, they don't have that force behind them, so you can just go in and take it. I mean, that's a big cause of wars as well, I'd say, because I mean,
right. I mean, we have the problem right now. I mean, the solution to all of this stuff is to not let one group. I mean, the one that you're describing as being bad. Pretty good analogy for what a government is. I mean, if you give anyone the authority to say this is the one rule, oh my gosh, it benefits them. What a surprise! I mean,
no, but then you don't
that's how you get those things.
But then you don't have all the whimsical differences that lead to all these conflicts.
No, because you do. You still have the dispute. I mean, the dispute doesn't go away. What we're talking about is a solution.
Sure, you have the dispute between individuals, but you have like some authority that can come in and say, no, this based on this objective document, which is this law, or the law, the Constitution, that sort of thing. Then you say, okay, then no, this belongs to you because of this. Or they have, yeah.
That's pretty weak. I mean, a lot of people have a lot of pieces of paper, and a lot of people with guns say a lot of stuff. The best justification is that they're the rightful owner of the property. Using the Lockean property principles, I mean...
Okay, but how do you... Like, I agree to an extent with Lockean property principles. But I think... How do you determine that in reality? That's not as obvious as...
It's a job. It's a job. It's a judge's job.
Yeah, but you need to have... You can't have competing judges saying that this is someone's property, and a different judge saying this is someone else's property.
Closest to objective reality, you do.
What?
If you want the best hamburger, you let them compete. If you want the best judgments, you let them compete. If you want the ones that... Because look, you both appreciated that there's some really nuanced situations that can occur in life that require creative and thoughtful minds to be able to parse what's the correct argument and who's morally right. Well, if you want the best to rise to the top, you let them compete. That's what I do. You get the best shoes.
No, but you can't do that with law though. That doesn't make any sense. You can't compete in force.
Judge Judy isn't employed by the government. She's solving disputes every day.
Sure, and what if she's wrong? And what if she has a disagreement with another judge?
It works out pretty well that she's only responsible for the parties involved in her cases.
I mean, but what if she's like wrong on a judgment? I mean, and then the other person's like, oh, this is...
Who cares? Because the way it works is even the person that's found guilty in Judge Judy's court doesn't have to pay anything.
What?
You aware of that? Yeah, it's kind of cool.
I don't know shit about Judge Judy.
Yeah, I'll explain. It's my favorite system of justice. 3 people go in: the judge, the plaintiff, and the defendant. Okay, so the defendant's saying, no, I didn't do something, and the plaintiff's like, yes, you did me wrong. Judge, let's just say, agrees with the plaintiff and says, hey, you did do this person wrong, so the defendant has to pay, right? Or whatever. The twist is that they are paid out of a fund maintained by the producers. So basically, Judge Judy, out of pocket, handles all their disputes in cash, and in return, she has a very popular show and is a multi-millionaire, 100-millionaire. It seems to work out pretty good for all the people in that court. That's kind of what I imagine.
But I mean, that wouldn't work out in like a broader context.
I don't see why not. I mean, that's just one solution.
Not every single judge is going to be super famous and like the ability to do that. Like that doesn't make any sense.
Well, there's other things like insurance and entertainment. I mean, people like World Star Hip Hop for a reason. What if they had like Maury? What if they had like fight at the end? Look, the amount of solutions that you could create is endless. But what you have to do is let people compete. If you say this is the one way we're going to do it, I guarantee you'll never have anything cool. But if you let people compete, you get things like Judge Judy. And then now there's like 10 people that do the same thing Judge Judy does. And they're all solving thousands of disputes a year better than any government court in the world.
I have no problem with that, but like, I have no problem with that. What law do they, like, what do they cite as their Like what
That's the fucking thing, bro.
It's just
You think
whim.
they
It's
cite
just based on nothing. It's just based
They're
on
fucking
nothing.
good judges. They're known to pass judgments that people are like, yeah, that guy was the asshole. Yeah, she shouldn't have done that. She's not appealing to law.
I mean, that's just.
She's
I mean, that's just
appealing to
rule of
natural
men. Then that's just.
morality.
I mean, that's just rule of men. Then it's just based on whatever the judge feels that day. Or
But if it was whatever the judge felt that day, don't you feel like it'd be like, wow, the judge just kind of does whatever she wants? No, obviously she's abiding by some principle, and it's righteousness, actual principles, not laws that are written down and people can screw around with. I mean, the Constitution's a pretty good example of the system that you're describing, a limited government on paper.
But you need some sort of law to like let people know how judges are going to react in a certain situation, because you can't necessarily judge that by just how they're feeling every day and just looking at that sort of stuff, and it doesn't make sense.
It's kind of how the world works, is that you're at the whims of your context, your circumstances. Look, a lot of people have disputes and see no resolution. The fact that justice can ever be offered is a product that requires people offering it as a service. And the fact that we monopolize that product just makes it shitty, overpriced, and ineffective. What we should do instead is open up the forum we have, at least in the sense of daytime TV judges, and say, hey, whoever wants to do this job, render judgments based on not their whims, but what they think is best for the parties involved. The cream will rise to the top. It has. Judge Judy's the best judge ever, and she's the richest, so it worked out.
So then what if like one judge and becomes like this one best judge, and it becomes like the only judge? Is that not a government? Is that not a government? If it's the one judge rises up?
Yes. In the same way, Google is the government of search engines. No, first of all, there's always going to be competition, and second of all, they have to earn it by being the best, not by stealing other people's stuff. That was a big difference.
Okay, but if there's, I mean, I don't agree that the government's going to steal people's stuff.
It's to compete on a free market. You can't predetermine this is the group that's going to carry out, because then they're going to blow it with that fucking. If they have that leverage, they're going to be worse than they would have been if they had to compete from their own bootstraps. So you let everyone do that, and then, yes, only the best will be able to have this monopoly. Only it'll be an earned monopoly, so we should all be thankful that the best law prospered. And that might be
or just the people who have the most force behind them. I mean, there's nothing that prevents that. There's literally nothing in place that prevents the person with the most force from rising up.
Imagine it's like a game of tug of war, dude. It's not like that. It's a game of like heads up, 7-up. Whoever's popping off doing aggressive violence, all the other judges are going to be like, oh, let's just wage judgments against this obvious asshole.
Okay, but what if people agree with
them?
What if they're
everyone else
the force for what people believe is righteous reason? Let's say people believe that we need to steal money from people to give to the poor, and then this one force company with all the force behind them just goes in and is like, okay, we're going to steal from these people and give it to these other people. There's nothing that prevents that.
I mean, it's what's happening right now. Now, the thing that prevents it is that
I disagree with that government. I disagree with the government on this.
Well, I'm just saying, I'm not saying it's easy, in that literally it's happening right now, so it's not like I can just wake up and stop it. But in anarchism, there's the best solution, which is the people with the vested interest in not being stolen from also have the right to defend themselves. We don't have that right against the tax collector.
There's no reason to prevent it just from whoever has the most force. There's literally nothing.
The only way to attain the most force is to be the best. The alternative is someone's squandering their wealth on dominance. Now that does happen, but that gets fettered out by the fact that that's an unpopular thing to do, is take all your cash and kill or steal from other people with it.
Not necessarily. I mean, people voted for Hitler and people wanted him.
Right. I mean, that problem was giving people a vote, not Hitler. As long as there's an authority, anyone in that spot's going to be kind of an asshole. I mean, it's just a
what if they get enough people behind them? They can come up with a really righteous message and then get enough people.
All of them can use them, but as soon as you say, then we're going to go steal from, well, then they create an enormous liability for themselves that the government does not, because they have an authority. If the government's saying this is what's right, no one can really bat an eye. But if it's McDonald's doing it, everyone's going to be like, bro, we're going to kill you. You want this to come from a decentralized or at least non-authoritative system, so that the people that do bad with their weapons are seen as bad people. Right now what we have is a system where people who are doing bad things with their weapons are greeted as the best of our society. They're literally used as a synonym for our society, the government. That's a huge mistake. It takes indoctrination and propaganda, but that's the outcome of centralizing it, not the opposite.
No, but I mean, there's nothing that stops different groups from collectivizing and joining together and like just trying to get their will imposed on the rest of society, and whoever has the most force wins. That's what's going to happen. That's what happens in our anarchy.
Right. I see where you're coming from, and that there's no like government stopping it, but you're using the wrong word when you say something stopping it. No, there's something stopping it.
What?
The people that are being aggressed against, they have a vested interest in not being aggressed against. So
okay, and what if they're a minority of people? What if they don't have as much force as that?
Good. And that minority has a valuable legal liability that even, let's just say, 51% of the corporation can capitalize on by turning on the other 49% and saying, actually, you're the asshole. Because they are.
I don't get what the legal liability is. How can they say that they're the asshole if everybody else disagrees with them being the asshole and they're like on the side of the asshole?
Well, I mean, look, if the hypothetical is what if everyone's, thinking that wrong is right, how you maintain in that world, you probably can't. I mean, that's the sad thing. But what you want is a system where right rises to the top.
And how do you do that? How does that happen? No, that's not necessarily true, because people can get swayed by all sorts of crazy ideas, and that's how all these like terrible governments have arisen, and that's ultimately all it is. That's ultimately all it's going to be, because the world is
political authority, where these idiots that have been persuaded are able to empower a government. You know how you empower a company? You have to invest your own cash. So these idiots aren't going to be so forthcoming with their own capital as they are with their vote.
Not necessarily. I mean, these people are going to...
I agree, not necessarily. Who's to say? But much more likely is the fact that decentralization will create less of a single person taking over all the power. I mean, if your big fear about not having a government is something that kind of resembles a government, I think it's worth it.
It's the idea that necessarily there'd be some sort of like oppressive government that arises if we don't have a limited government that is simply restricted to protecting individual rights.
Where's this limited government? In the 1800s? I mean, we don't have one now, as far as I can tell.
Sure, and we need to, and that's where we need like a philosophical base for that. We need some sort of like ethical base for that, and that's what Ayn Rand offers with rational egoism.
I agree. A lot of people see the same thing, that there's this big, thing going on right now, and it's bad. And imagining that it could be much, much smaller and better is true. But the principle that underlies that is that less government is better all the way. Zero being
no,
the best.
That's not true, because
then where do you draw the line? Because it's always going to be arbitrary.
At force, you draw the line at force.
Why not put a price ceiling on Yeezy sneakers?
You draw the line at force. The government is restricted to the three roles: military, courts, and police, and that's it. And then it can only respond to initiation of force. It can't initiate force on its citizens. And that's, you write that into law, and you have a rule of law, and that's the most objective way to do it.
We're just going for ideals here. Much, much better would be to not write that down, and then just make people appreciate that, you got to figure this stuff out. Protecting your life, your property, that's your responsibility, and then people will create services that fulfill that demand in the same way every people get fed. We didn't have to write down everyone should make hamburgers with these 6 ingredients. No, as soon as there's a demand, then there's going to be people that go in to satisfy it. See your roommate's back.
Yeah. What's up?
How's it going, man?
Pretty good.
Meeting strangers on the internet.
What's up? Yeah.
So tell me you're meeting strangers on the internet.
Yeah. Shit, I forgot what we were talking about.
But I won't keep you too long. I think we've actually had a great...
Yeah, it was a good discussion. I think, yeah. What were we talking about again? I'm sorry, I forgot.
Yeah, I was going on my classic diatribe about how you just don't control things centrally. If the same reason we don't let government mandate the price of shoes and the amount of hamburgers that get made is the same reason we don't entrust them to prevent aggression. Preventing aggression is just a demand that people have.
No, that's the initiation of force. So I don't agree with that. I think initiation of force, like when it comes into society, it restricts the human mind.
There's a demand to cut down on that, since everyone has a mind they don't want to be suppressed.
Yeah. So we have one government that is restricted to only like responding in self-defense to the initiation of force.
Right.
And then if you have all these competing governments rising up that can initiate force, and there's no check on that, I mean, that's the sort of system you're proposing, and it would ultimately result in just gang warfare.
Because you say no check. There's the obvious check that people don't want to be hustled, scammed, killed, or stolen from. And people lose that control. They don't have that same check when they are told that this is their one government that they have to abide by. Then people just say, you know what, never mind. But if it's a service, they could boycott it when they piss them off, And again, your whole taxation thing's allegedly voluntary. Well, then I'm saying that someone else could open up shop, outcompete them, and the fact that they both coexist isn't a bad thing. It's a good thing. The fact that one thing is in charge is always.
But they can't rise up and that's essentially an insurrection. I mean, that's the idea of coming up with a new law and establishing that, and then law is enforced whimsically, and then people can't activate on the basis of the laws.
I mean, look how quick you have an authoritarian government of your own. Oh, this guy.
You cut out.
Yeah, you really opened the window then for an authoritarian government. Open the door for an authoritarian government of your own, because someone could always just say, oh, this is to stop insurrection. And then they start doing terrible, terrible things, aggressing against peaceful people, but they say that they're, planning some insurrection, and who's really to say? Whereas if everyone was pretty skeptical of anyone using force, and we didn't say this is the people that are allowed to, then in the same way that we don't get conned by Amazon,
nobody's allowed to use force. Nobody's allowed to initiate force in this society. That's what you have.
But those are, right. But then what happens when the government does? Who's going to stop the government?
I mean, that's not. Then
paper going to animate itself.
I mean, that's the purpose of having the Second Amendment, right to bear arms. Then you can respond. You can respond with force when they initiate force. But you still want to have one objective law. You still want to have one objective law so that people know how to act, and people know how to act in the market, and people know how the law is going to be enforced.
Yeah, but that one law probably isn't going to come from the people we choose. In fact, it's the opposite. It comes from people that you choose. As far as we wrote it down, it's always kind of a mistake. As soon as you give people power, it corrupts them. So instead, you make people compete for it. And yes, there'll be an ebb and flow of this. McDonald's is the best hamburger restaurant this year, but next time it's Chick-fil-A. Whatever, dude. That's fine. But what you can be assured is that they're all providing better and better services for lower and lower prices year over year. That's how
that can't work when it comes to force, though. You can't have competing laws. That's the whole point that I've been trying to make in this discussion.
Let me ask this: why doesn't Burger King go shoot up McDonald's?
Because you have the government that stops it. You can't. It's illegal.
You really think that's the reason why? I mean, do you really think they're one law being passed from the purge away from just?
I mean, obviously, it's not in their self-interest, but the only thing that actually prevents it from happening is a government.
No, but that's where you're wrong. You say the only thing, that there's nothing stopping. That self-interest is a powerful tool that we need to harness. That's the whole point.
Not everybody acts in their self-interest all the time. That's simply untrue. Okay.
That's a debate I'd be happy to have, because that's what the words mean. I mean, they chose. It's demonstrated preference.
No, not everybody acts in their self. There's.
What's a counter?
You're ignoring the influence of different ideas that people can have. People can believe certain things that they need to sacrifice their own self-interest for other people and different things like that, and that leads to them not acting in their self-interest. People don't always necessarily act. People have free will. I mean, they don't necessarily act in their self-interest.
In their interest to do whatever sacrifices they chose to. I mean, that's not their interest.
That's not your interest. No, that's not their self-interest.
The best judge is the person themselves, and their best way to objectively decide what their preference was is what they did.
The best judge of that is reality, the objective facts of what's actually good for their life. This is the consequences of philosophy here. This is where we have such different philosophy.
Is what they choose.
What?
Who's to say what's good for their life? The best way to know is what they choose. They know what's best for themselves.
It's simply reality exists. Everything is what it is, and you have certain requirements for your life and certain requirements for your happiness, and those are objective facts. It's not.
But I think the things that you place as requirements are a lot more mundane. The actual requirements are more mundane than what you would say. I mean, people can get away with pursuing happiness and being satisfied in their whatever nihilistic, or what's the other one you guys hate, the people that give up, the altruistic means. I mean, that's their choice. If they chose, it's their preference.
Sure, and that's not in their best interest.
The only place we draw the line when they start using other people's resources for them. That's when it's fucked up. But see, the fact people want to self-sacrifice, kill themselves, I mean, that's their own expression. That's what they
And
want.
that's immoral. That's fucked up.
I can say so. I wouldn't do it for myself, but to say that
No,
someone else.
it's actually immoral because it's not in the best interest of their life.
I mean, let's just think about okay. Let's think of the implication. We're saying suicide's illegal. What are we going to force them to stop? I mean,
I'm not saying suicide's illegal. I'm not saying no. You don't need to enforce morality. That's a thing.
Okay.
Like
Okay,
I'm saying
good,
it's immoral,
good.
but you're not.
Okay, no, I agree with that. You don't have to enforce morality. And let's get back to the self-interest thing then. So if all you're saying is that these people's are not okay, let me think about the phrase. They're not acting in their self-interest, but you're not saying you should like make them do so.
No, you shouldn't force people to act in their self-interest.
So that's interesting. So I mean, to me, I just circle that square by saying, well, what they're doing is their self-interest, and sometimes their self-interest competes with what I would like.
What if what they're doing is violating someone else's rights? If that's not in their like that's something immoral. That's one thing where I think that that's one thing where I think that the government should enforce that. That's one thing I think the government should enforce.
The whole thing is you want to clamp down that. Yes, people have an interest of, let's say, just engaging in some kind of property crimes time to time. But yeah,
I mean, that's not their self-interest, but I mean, but that's something that we need to that's something that we need to protect from.
Right, and the protection starts with the ability to do it yourself, and then to hire other people to do it for you. And from that springs a market, and when you see markets, you see outcomes.
That does not work.
It worked everywhere else, and it worked here. I mean, wasn't America somehow an experiment in a different type of market, and we're all competing right now on Earth, and all the governments that do it are doing their best, and they all suck, but I mean, that's a competition, so I just wait for the cream to rise to the top. I mean, and look, you want to correct when you're in one of these nations, you could be like, Bucko, we could be doing a lot better. We could be cleaning our room, so to speak. I mean, but ultimately,
you're cutting out.
Oh yeah, sorry, my internet does get bad around here. But no, I'm flashing. I'm scared I'm cutting out. But the governments are always going to be perverse, and as long as we kind of rely on a unitary system, we're going to have the same problems. Freedom, a free society, is one where we don't really rely on a singular thing, and everyone going their own way can create a beautiful harmony that invisible hand will guide.
You can't really have a market enforce them because the market requires you can't have force in a market because force prevents people from acting on their own judgments, from thinking and acting on their own judgments, and that's required in a market because you need to decide what sort of things to produce, what sort of things are win-win for you, and what sort of trades you need to make.
That's just an argument that it's the most important thing to put on the market, because I'm telling you the best outcomes come from competitive solutions. Never have a mandate.
That's only true in the absence of force from a market.
I mean,
that's only true when there's no force in a market, because you can't, like, if there's force involved in a market, you can't make those win-win transactions that are the reason that the market is so successful.
Well, okay, so I agree that I'm not counting forceful transactions as part of the market, but I'm saying that there is a market for force. In other words, the defense of property and the rectification of injustice. Those are two services that people want. They require force, but at the end of the day, so does making hamburgers. It requires the force to not, have robbers burn down the place. I mean, they put doors and locks for a reason. There's
someone needs to enforce that. I mean, that's like
in the absence of the state, they're not just going to let people run ransack. They're going to protect.
The enforcement mechanism can't be like whimsical and based on absolutely nothing but what people feel at the moment.
It'd be based on practical reasons that people are willing to put their money behind, as opposed to, I don't know, any kind of government. You always have the problem of political authority. These people don't have to do anything.
Yeah, you're gonna.
As soon as money is a part of it,
you're gonna have the problem with authority with different like leaders of these different like whatever the hell they are, like fucking gangs or whatever they are.
Yeah. I mean, these gangs sound so dang compared to the government. I mean, that's the only thing I can say. The competition that they create would only be goods. I mean, you're imagining that this is a bad thing competing, because again, there's two ways to look at it. You have the initiation of force, and then you have the defense of the initiation of force. And I see initiation of force is not a service you can put on a market.
But you can. If force isn't banned, then you can. That can always be something that you can put a market for.
Yeah, but that's not really the market as I'm describing. I'm talking about all the voluntary interactions between people.
Sure, and force makes it involuntary, and you can't have like force. This is so fucking incoherent. I
And
can't figure it out.
I get it. But look, it's true. But look, I'm willing to use force against people that are violent. That's where I draw the distinction. Is as soon as you become an aggressive person,
but there's no reason to say that what you want it to be done is going to be what's actually done, because it's just a bunch of whatever people feel like.
Well, I mean, you keep saying that, but it's like McDonald's just do whatever they feel. They serve customers at the end of the day. I mean,
Sure, McDonald's doesn't have force though. McDonald's doesn't have force behind them.
Right, but I mean, you still have to wonder. Is nothing stopping them from doing what they want? There's something stopping them from doing what they want. Discipline of constant market dealings. The fact they want to have more customers tomorrow. I mean, that's the same thing for a rights enforcement agency. If they are doing property crimes in their spare time with all their weapons, they're not going to have the authority. They're not going to get the customers back tomorrow.
But I mean, McDonald's could just accumulate arms and just take over. Like there's nothing stopping that if there's no government.
Well, you keep saying nothing, but I mean, again, people have an interest in not being ruled by Mickey D's, so they'll defend themselves. And
sure, why do they have that interest?
They have every right to do so. Whereas if a government's doing it, you don't have a right to do so. It's insurrection if you have a problem with the way things are being done. You should just be able to take your business elsewhere.
If your self-interest is just whatever people do, what's going to stop people from just like saying, "Oh yeah, I'm okay with McDonald's being," like there's McDonald's being accumulating arms and violating people's rights.
I'm sure Ronald and Ray Kroc would say exactly that, but the practical situation is that there's a lot of people that don't want to be ruled by the right to defend themselves. And that right would be collectivized by everyone that's not McDonald's, right? When you have a aggressive perpetrator, it's everyone versus them. It makes it kind of a pretty asymmetric battle.
Okay, but they're not. That's not what they would do. They would get people behind them. They would get, think about,
right.
Think about the places where there's vacuums in government, in government policing. That's where all the gangs arise and stuff, because these gangs, they get a bunch of people behind them who are like, okay, no, I'm going to protect you because there's nobody that's protecting you from this violence. So they get these gangs behind them, and the gangs rise up and begin to compete, and that's ultimately the sort of system that I think would happen in the absence of government.
Hey, look, being a gang is illegal. That's why they're violent. Being McDonald's is not illegal. That's why they're not violent. That's the most obvious distinction to me, is that if we just legalized being a dispute resolution agency or a right enforcement mechanism, it wouldn't be violent in the same way McDonald's not. Here's my favorite thing.
The gangs. Pretty funny. The gangs arise in the absence of government.
Yeah. 1 second. Right. So, and this is my favorite part of this, is you're like, McDonald's would, accumulate all these resources and convince people to work with them, right? By what?
I'm not saying
providing
they
best
could.
Product, by satisfying them, by saying, we'll do what you want, not by doing whatever they want. It's not going to attract anyone. So the best service providers are going to be the ones that do the most for the most people. I mean, it's utilitarian,
so then you have just this populist McDonald's. They rise up and they're like, I'm going to defend your interests, your working class interests, and I'm going to go take out all these other rich people over here. There's nothing that stops that.
And then the rich people will have Chick-fil-A and they'll fucking shoot them out, dude. And I'm saying it's not going to come to blows.
And that's being warfare. That's the problem. But oh my gosh, you disagreed with my point.
Right. No, I did, but you need to take it 2 steps further. I took it 1 step further, and you got to take it 2. So McDonald's, they get all their shit together, and they march on Chick-fil-A, and Chick-fil-A blows them the fuck up. Step 3 is, that's why McDonald's doesn't march in the first place. That's why no one's going to do this. No one's going to die.
How do you know Chick-fil-A is gonna fucking blow McDonald's up?
It's so easy to defend yourself. One fucking bomb against invaders is sick, dude. Imagine if you could just nuke invaders. So it's asymmetric. Defense always has the advantage. Defender's advantage. It's a thing.
No, you can bomb defenders. You can't. You're
reading Crime and Punishment. You need war. You need War and Peace for this. What's up? I was making a joke about. You know Crime and Punishment, but you need a war. Dude, these people aren't going to risk their life and limb, in sacrifice. They have a self-interest in surviving. Everyone does, and mutually ensured, maybe not complete destruction, but at least violence is enough of a deterrent.
McDonald's has a whole working class behind. I'm echoing now.
Yeah, I'm just see if I can turn this down.
But McDonald's has this whole Oh, I'm still really echoing. Fuck. Okay, I can just talk through it if you.
No, I couldn't hear you. It was breaking up. Try again.
All right.
Sorry.
So McDonald's has this whole like, whoa, it's really bad. Shit.
Yeah, what am I doing wrong?
I don't know. It was working fine before, and then I just started echoing.
I'm jealous of the headphones. Let me try that out.
All right, is this working?
Yeah, but not through my headphones. Keep going though.
Shit. All right, so like McDonald's has the whole working class behind them, and then they have all, like the 99%, and they're gonna take over, attack Chick-fil-A, and they're gonna, like, they have the force to do it, and they're gonna win. So then they're gonna do it. Why would they not?
Cut out. I was getting into it too. McDonald's is taking over. They have the working class, but the rich people are richer. Fuck, I wish I could hear you. Oh man, dude, I'm getting the same problem I had when I started. I just my whole audio cut out. I think we should pick it up another time. Fuck, I don't like leaving it like this. I wish I could hear you. I think I have to restart my computer to get audio again.
Right.
But I think I just want to.
Can you hear me right now?
Long video. I'll edit some highlights, and we can just pick it up another time. It doesn't have to be. Oh, God damn! I can't hear you, dude. I can see you in chat, but
fuck,
I got no audio. Let me know if you have any suggestions. I'm happy to restart and keep going, but I do need to restart my computer to hear you.
Hold up, let me type. I just said I can deal with the echoes if that's okay. We could just come to a conclusion after.
Yeah, I can hear you now. Okay, cool. Sorry, I got tripped up there.
Is that good? Everything's working?
Yeah, perfect. Okay,
right,
cool.
We could try to wrap it up soon too, because it's been.
Yeah, no, it's been. I think it was just a cool talk, but we could leave anyone that's been willing to stick with us with a closing, bit, and peace out till next time. I'll edit it a bit to get rid of some of these breaks.
Yeah. All right, but do we want to finish off like my last point, or we can?
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead with the McDonald's. Right. They're taking over. Finish up. Sure, go on.
So I was just saying, like, what? Okay, so like McDonald's, they have the whole working class behind them, the 99%. They have all the arms necessary to take over and destroy Chick-fil-A and destroy the wealthy. And then why would they? What stops them?
You're begging the question. I mean, if they really have all the arms necessary. Well, then I have to wonder how they got them. I mean,
they have the whole working. They have the whole 99% behind them. That everybody against the 1%. You know.
1% has like half the cash. They could buy more shit than all of them combined. That's the whole thing. And I think the top 20% would probably band together with the 1%, not with the losers.
I mean, no. This is just an analogy, though. Like, let's say.
I know, but you're begging so many questions. You're like, what if everything?
No, I'm not.
It's not reality. This isn't what would happen.
If you get enough people,
99% of people have never agreed on anything.
Okay, then let's say the top 20% wants to band together and attack the bottom 80%.
Okay, I mean, that's going to be a fair fight that no one wants to fight. It's probably the only thing you'd get people to agree with, and then in the same moment they'd recognize, oh yeah, we'll just all die because it's a fair fight. So no one's going to do it.
It wouldn't be like, let's say, no, my argument is that it's not a fair fight anymore. Like,
wait, those unfair fights don't really, need to be engaged in.
Why? Because they want to take the property and all that stuff of another person.
Because you always create an instant asymmetry. The people that are rights violators will be looked down upon by everyone else. No one can accumulate.
But what if the rights violators are the majority?
Unrealistic. Yeah, what if super unrealistic?
Like, what if the rights violators are the majority though?
Well, then we have what we have today at the very worst. It's just, I mean, I don't have any prediction that that's going to happen. I think it's like, why aren't we asking why doesn't McDonald's the cheeseburgers? No one does. It's not really how markets work. No one does most of anything. And if they do, it's because they do it so much better than everyone else, like Google.
No, I mean, that's not true because you can simply accumulate enough property and enough arms and just use force. But we're just talking in circles now, so I think
no. I've addressed that too, though. That's called squandering wealth, right? You're not making any money by doing that, by accumulating property and then spending it in violent actions. Eventually, that train runs out. I mean, how much of that do you think you get away with? It's not profitable.
But I mean, Germany did that, and they were a very
They're a
powerful
government.
government
They
for a
have
long time.
authority. That's the distinction. If you think people are allowed to do this, they're going to get away with it in spades. They're going to indoctrinate entire populations to satisfy their own parasitical values. But if you start at the outset by
Sure
saying no
is.
hurting, no killing for anyone, including the whatever you want to call government, you get rid of
Who
90%
says
of these
that though? Who
problems.
says that though? Who says no hurting, no stealing? Who determines that?
That's all you need. You teach it to your kids, and you live in that world. And there will be mechanisms
what about
that enforce those two principles in the absence of government. As long as there's governments, those two principles are defied every day. It's the law
Those
of
are
the
not the
land to
principles.
defy those principles.
Those are not the principles that everyone's going to agree on, though. That's not,
Then
that's not
you're a herder or a stealer, and there's no place for you in polite society. I have a lot of sympathy for those losers.
Well, okay, but what happens to them? They can
They're gonna
accumulate
get
wealth. And they can be okay.
they're gonna get beat the f up, dude. Aggressive people won't last in a peaceful society.
No.
The only
There's
people
no
that
reason
can
to-
engage
there's
with
no
are
reason to
other
believe that.
aggressive people.
There's no reason to believe that. What if there's enough? There's enough aggressors though.
Right. Well, then they'll slit each other's throats. I mean, a gang of thieves is no gang at all.
No, but all throughout history, you see different large groups of people who want to violate other people's rights, and they begin to take over, and then they.
The only
That's
ones
what
that get
happens.
away with it are governments.
Because they get big enough so that that's always going to come out of an anarchist society. There's always going to be a new tyrannical government that comes out of an anarchist society.
I mean,
That's why
I would say the
anarchism
same thing to any
ultimately-
constitutional government. No, we don't know the full consequences of anything yet. And if you want the best chance at having a free society, you don't vest any power in any individuals or groups.
Once you have that objective document that has the principles laid out, then people then you have that government in place, and then people will notice when that's being violated, and they'll get annoyed, and then they'll respond to that.
But the document's hard to read. Don't hurt, don't steal is 4 words. Why don't we just go with mine? And why don't we just call it the document while we're at it?
Okay, and then who enforces that document? And you don't have a mechanism.
No, as long
of
as
enforcement.
your voluntary government has these 4 words as its constitution, I'm with it. And as long as I can opt out when it inevitably violates one of those 2 rules, then you're just talking about anarchism. But I mean, it's not too far from what you're going with.
That's not anarchism, because you can't.
I mean, what's the document going to say? All the deep implications of candy bars at liquor stores? No, you start with basics and you let people.
Well, yeah, you start with basics, but then you continue from there and establish more from there.
You agree it's going to be super nuanced and you can't put it all on paper, right? And there's going to be circumstances in the future that we weren't able
But
to
you have to put it on paper. You have to have some objective. You have to have some
and
objective
anything
state.
beyond "don't hurt, don't steal" is a mistake. I'm like, what would be one more thing you'd add? And we'll let fraud be our
I don't know.
50-50.
I'm not a legal scholar. I don't know.
I mean, then maybe I'm right. Then maybe the principles that you're looking for are "don't hurt, don't steal."
No, there's more to that. There's applications and all that shit. Come on now.
Okay, I agree. There's applications. That's what applications are. The principle, though, is "don't hurt, don't steal." And it derives from self-ownership or pursuit of happiness, whatever you want. It's a good thing to go.
The principle is just don't initiate force.
Okay, same. Those are the 2 ways to initiate force: hurting and stealing.
I feel like there's definitely more ways than that, but
The debatable one is fraud, and I think it was a good discussion. I've been waiting to have that discussion.
I'd say yeah, fraud is definitely something that.
Okay, I'm with you.
And there's all the different.
But the next thing besides that, it's pretty baseless to inflict violence against people doing them. Smoking weed has been an example. Insurrection's the other. I mean, in other words, saying things. You got to be real careful with that. Violence is the real danger. That's the violation of rights.
All right. I mean,
okay. So let me. Can I start summing it up here and getting this out of this pit? Like you said, we've been going in some circles here. Yeah. I think we mostly agree, man. I think 99%. We'd like to see the same thing, and the fact that we have some different titles for some different stuff. It's semantic. As far as actual outcomes, we want the same thing. We want freedom, prosperity, private property, expression of moralities. We don't want to force it on anyone. So, I mean, there's no real room for disagreement. Our predictions about how that comes about are going to be varied. Obviously, that's individualism.
I think the only way it could come about, though, is ultimately through some sort of monopoly on force. But we.
Right. I mean, that's a position that is right what we're debating over, but it doesn't make us enemies. We're deciding if we should send in the cavalry or the artillery first. I mean, we're trying to get to the same thing, and you know, I do see where you're being a little tough on me, and that you think that my solution would be totally bad and dramatically in the wrong way. But just rest assured, I think the same thing about your solution. You know, empowering a government would be just as foolish. So, I mean, we're going to agree to disagree there. This makes us allies in a movement. And the fact that we're all trying to square the same circle and arrive at the same goal, it makes me happy. If everyone was doing the same thing I was doing, we wouldn't get anywhere. I mean, I have less, I have 50 subscribers or whatever. I mean, I'm obviously not doing it the perfect way. There's ways we could improve, but you know, messaging, technique, predictions, these are things I like to discuss, and you know, hopefully we can keep doing that. I was being snarky with you at some points. I hope you just took this as a honest discussion. I was serious, you know, about I do have some pretty crazy views, and sometimes coming up with the implications is the fun part, but I think I was trying to stick with you there.
Yeah, for sure. Sorry, I got very heated in there. I think it was a good discussion, though. I think
I don't take it personally.
I think we're both fairly good faith, but yeah, I've dealt with a lot more. I mean, all my videos dealing with alt-right people, those comment sections are bad.
Yeah, I get that too. Like I did one on like overpopulation. I was like, we should let more people prosper, and they're like, nah, anyone on welfare. Kind of these people are radicals, but in questionable way. But that's the online territory. You come up across a lot of things, and you debate the ideas that interest you, and you feel passionate for. And you know what I really like about the whole thing is a third person can go and watch all this and create their third idea. So no one's got it right. We need these discussions and this activity to kind of vault our ideas forward.
Yeah, for sure. It was nice talking with you, man.
Nice meeting you, Garrett. It's a pleasure, man. So anytime you want to discuss, maybe I'll see a video you post that I want to hit you up about, or the same vice versa, and we'll discuss it next time.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Nice talking to you, man.
Cheers. Have a good one.
Peace. All right. That was the discussion. It was a good time. Whew, I got very heated, and I'm fine with it. Yeah, that was a long discussion, and hopefully there's more of those in the future. I'll probably talk to him more often. You'll probably see more of him on the channel. I think we got into good stuff. There's stuff I obviously am going to regret from that, and yeah, it should be. I grew from that. I think I definitely got more of an understanding of his conclusions, and yeah, so I think that's all I have to say for today. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. Peace.